Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel Brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Hello and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And I'm Ricky Siegel, a certified sex therapist and supervisor.
And proud to say my brother.
Cheers to that.
Cheers, yes indeed. And cheers to you all. Thank you for joining us.
We toast you with our ritual sake toast.
Yes indeed. And today we have an Asian pear sake.
Very tasty.
Yeah, it's got a nice, subtle, sweet little taste to it. I like it.
Thank you for joining us on Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers, our weekly venue for doing what we do best.
That's right.
Imparting information, talking about sex, sexual health, sexuality, things that, as we always say, what else is more universal for every human on the planet and yet the most uncomfortable thing to talk about?
Yeah.
How much sense does that make?
Well, I mean, again, it's been a classic irony, right? What people do in the dark, they can't talk about with the lights on.
Yeah, which is really kind of upside down.
It really is.
It should be easier to talk about it than to do it, but somehow, especially in the dark with a good buzz on,
right,
it's easier to do it and never talk about it.
That's right. That's right. So, again, we've talked about this, several times over the years, how, again, this irony that the source of life, the source of so much of life's pleasure, basically is such a discomfort for so many people and a source of pain and agony for so many people. The
thing that should make us happiest about being humans, right? The best perk of this gig is having these parts, having these brains, having these functions, these abilities to derive so much pleasure from our bodies. And yet, just to reiterate the point you just made, for how many people is their sexuality a source of shame and pain and guilt? And, their entire, it's not just in the bedroom. People's entire lives are upended by sexual shame. People are either thrown out or throw themselves out of their families, their communities, their congregations, their culture, because what they think is right or wrong about what they are as a person, right? How many times, going back forever, all the people that we studied coming up in this field always say the same thing. Sexuality is not about what we do with our genitals. It's about what we are as human beings.
Right.
And that no one
it's our core.
No one is excused from that.
Right. It's the core aspect of our humanity.
Yeah.
Right? And but again, we can do a whole show just on these ironies, because I think another irony that comes along with this as well is, I don't know any other area where just because people may have had an experience, they consider themselves expert.
Well, if something happened to me, that makes me an expert in it, is that right?
Well, there's that part of it as well. But I mean, just from the standpoint, well, if I've ever had sex, well, I'm an expert at sex.
Well,
right? Hey, I defrosted a Swanson frozen dinner one time. Could I go apply as a chef? Right? Does that give me the ability to go ahead and do that? So, because I have, there's that sense of I automatically know. And this is another little irony, is that's probably one area where our experience in some ways is least helpful. We have to consciously learn. We have to make a point of really being open and inquisitive about the body, what it does, what it can do, what we can do with it, instead of just assumption after assumption about how things are supposed to be.
And the constant panic of being normal.
Right.
Am I normal? Am I like everybody?
Exactly.
All those mixed messages. Well, we'll do a show on that, right?
Yeah.
Be yourself, like everybody else.
Right. Like
Sex is dirty, so save it for the one you love.
That's right. I think it was, I want to say Rabbi Shmuley who originally came up with this, but that's that concept of sexual schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Right? And just exactly like you're saying.
It was Balfour, Abraham Balfour, if memory serves correctly. And I've been looking for that article for years in boxes of files. But that's a great article.
Yeah.
I haven't found it online either.
Yeah, it's a great term as well.
Forgivable misuse of the term schizophrenia, but it makes a really powerful point.
Yeah, it really does. And how many girls, look to their first sexual experience and still have that script. Oh, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be special. But get drunk and just get it over with.
Yeah, because it's going to hurt like hell.
Right.
And then you'll come to love it.
Exactly.
We're just like the bigger health picture in this country, right?
Mm-hmm.
You will never find a more health obsessed and unhealthy country as the United States in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. And sex being a part of that bigger picture of health, we have a culture that's sex obsessed,
yes,
but terrified and schizophrenic and running around like crazy and we have to protect the children, but we're going to watch disgusting, twisted, sleazy shit on cable TV, right? Isn't it ironic? Fox always shows those like band commercials and all that titillating, salacious stuff, and their news division is like the most conservative, supposedly.
Right. But again, that whole other part of that, set of ironies that, and I think, just worth repeating what you just mentioned, because there is that we have to protect the children, but we have to exploit them too. Right? We're protecting them and we're exploiting them.
Another show.
The sexualization of children.
Yeah.
In the midst of all of this
But
child
I'm just talking about this this sea of information, right? This constant, ever-present health information, sexuality information, and does it help, or is it just adding to the noise, right?
Well, I think there's both, and I think there is so much noise that we have to get through to find the actual information.
There's so much crap on the internet, but yet there is really good, helpful information.
Right,
and people are encouraged how to find it. Right. And books abound. There's thousands of sex books, but
how many of them are really helpful?
Really, really good ones.
Yeah.
So we're pleased tonight that we have the chance to. We had the chance earlier to speak with an author, someone we've been reading for as long as we've been in this field.
Yeah.
We'll be speaking. We spoke with Mike Castleman, who has an interesting place, and he talked about this. He's not, like most of our guests, a sex researcher or a therapist or an educator. He's always been a journalist, but he's been writing about sex since the 70s, and is really one of the nation's best authorities at this point.
Yeah, he really is.
One of Psychology Today's best bloggers. And we'll be talking about his new book, Sizzling Sex for Life, right? So why don't we break and come back and share our interview with Dr. Michael Castleman. So the Siegel brothers are back, and it's a real honor to have yet another sexological pioneer with us tonight. We have the pleasure of speaking with Michael Castleman, truly one of the nation's most renowned and prolific sexology journalists. 14, 15 books. It's a very lengthy list, and had the pleasure of previewing his latest book. And I need to ask you this because we just spoke to Dr. Steve Snyder last week, and he told us how, the author has their title and then the publisher pushes their title because they want to sell more books. So I noticed Sizzling Sex for Life was not the original title I saw in the preview.
That's correct.
Right. So that was a publisher thing, right?
Right. The original title was Great Sex Guidance, which is
there is a website of
my website, greatsexguidance.com. Yeah. But in trade publishing, you want to hype it and then hype it even more.
Sure.
So they said they were going to retitle the book And I said, well, if you're going to do that, why don't you let me suggest some titles? So I suggested 24 titles, and Sizzling Sex was one of them. And that was the one they went for. And about half the people who I told that to said, oh, that's so much better than Great Sex Guidance. And about half the people said, oh, I like Great Sex Guidance better. You know, after a while, what happens is the title is just the title, and people like don't even notice it anymore. You know, this book is going to be called Sizzling Sex, and I can live with it, and I even like it.
Good. Yeah, with Dr. Snyder's book, it was his title was Love Worth Making, and the publisher's push was the subtitle How to Have Mind-Blowing Sex in Long-Term Relationships. So I want to ask you kind of the same question, because we know there's lots of books on self-help and sex therapy and sexuality education. And I asked why he wrote that book. And he said, because there's like 75 books on how to tie your partner up, but he didn't find too many on just sexual feelings for mostly kind of middle of the road, long-term married couples. Now, I've been a long-term fan of your Psychology Today articles. I love your style and so approachable.
Yeah, it really is a great column.
When I first had the opportunity to preview, at that time, Great Sex Guidance, my first thought, and what I would have offered as, you know, like you have any shortage of giants raving about the books, but I've been asked for a long time by students, supervisees, other therapists, with all the books that there are, probably more books on sex than there are sex therapists in the country. What's the one go-to general, get all your answers, all your questions answered book? And for 25 years, it's been Paul Joanniti's Guide to Getting It On.
Right.
As soon as I got your preview, I said, now there's 2 on my shelf. Now this is the next go-to book, mostly, but for a lot of reasons, but mostly because you both, I think, are reaching the hardest audience to reach, straight guys who don't go typically looking for sex books.
Right. Well, I have tremendous respect. I have tremendous respect for the Guide to Getting It On, and I think I've owned like 2 or 3 different editions of it.
Yeah.
But over the years, as I got older, and I'm 70, and so I felt like what was needed was a comprehensive guide to all of the typical sex issues throughout life, organized in a way that people can find it easily and locate their what they want to read easily, and that's entirely evidence-based. And so I'm reasonably adept at medical research and reading these sexological journals. And Sizzling Sex is based on 2,500 studies. So it is the most thoroughly in-depth researched general sex book that I know of. I set out to do that. And I think I did that. There's, you know, when the publisher, there's so many footnotes, there's so many references, that when the publisher accepted the book and they got to the last page and it says for references, go to this website, they said, well, we don't want to go to a website. We want to publish the references. I said, do you realize that 2,500 references are going to take 100 pages extra? Do you really want to print 100 extra pages and ship it, and the ink, the paper, the weight? And they said, you know what? Let's stick with the website.
Yeah, good idea. Website, yeah.
So that's what we've got. The book, it is not footnoted. It's not an academic book because most people who are professionals and academics are used to reading footnoted text. But a lot of the public just doesn't like footnotes. They're put off by them. And so I've gone with a more journalistic style of, in my, you know, the references are there, but there's no numbers on the text. If you go to the chapter, if you know what chapter you're reading, you go to that chapter in the footnotes, and it's easy to find the material. But what I wanted to do was present something that was uniquely comprehensive, and that really examined all of the subjects that people have asked me about for 40 years.
And
I've
right
answered,
about.
I've answered more than 12,000 questions. And every now and then I still get new ones. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I used to be a health writer. I used to write about health and sexuality. But overwhelmingly, the thank you notes that I got were all about the sex. And so as I got older, I thought, well, I'm just not going to interested in having the same kind of breadth I had when I was writing for magazines and writing health books. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to keep writing about sex because, number one, I really enjoy it. It's fascinating. And I get the thank you notes. And it may sound a little silly, but they really make a difference.
Sure. Yeah. No, and I don't think that sounds silly at all. I mean, those of us that are in these kinds of professions, we don't have a whole lot that we can, show in terms of impact and any kind of signs or markers that we're doing kind of the right thing and that we are sort of making a difference. And those things really are very validating.
Yeah.
It's an impressive body of work. And as we talked about before we started recording, we're pleased to know that we're fellow Long Islanders at some point, but you made your way out to San Francisco in the mid-'70s.
Right.
With your wife going med school and you starting a journalism career. So you have an interesting place among sexologists where you're not a clinician, but a journalist, right. but truly a sexological researcher after 4 decades of writing about this subject we work in.
Yeah, it's plenty of journalists write about sex. I mean, there's it's all over the place. But most journalists who write about sex, it's a sort of hit and run thing. They write about sex and then they never write about it again, or they write it 10 years from now. I've been consistently writing about sex, sexuality, sex research, sex therapy for almost 50 years. And that doesn't necessarily confer wisdom, but it does confer experience. And my own predilection is to embrace sex research very, very much. And so, every month I'm reading Journal of Sexual Medicine. I'm reading Archives of Sexual Behavior. And most of the journalists I know who also write about sex, and the journalism I read from people I don't know who write about sex, it's typical for a journalist a new study came out showing this.
Right.
And without context, without history, without any sense of why they even looked at that. And so I've tried to provide perspective and historical perspective as well. And in my book, in Sizzling Sex, I go back as far as the Bible, which is very sexual, to talk about how sex and our feelings about it and our cultural attitudes toward it have evolved. So that's what makes my book a little different from, say, Guide to Getting It On, which is basically pitched at young adults. He wrote it as a college textbook.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's a very good college textbook, but it is not the trade book that a whole lot of people need. And so I felt like there was a niche that still needed to be filled. I spent 3 years doing it.
Really nice.
Nice. And when it comes to writing things like this, style really is everything. And you've always written in such a way that people can so easily connect with what you're writing. People want to see what's coming next. And I'm not going to be able to come up with the right word in this moment right now, but it's something that I'm just going to say there's something gratifying and maybe even fulfilling in the way you do present a lot of this stuff. So when the reader experiences it, they're really, there's really some experience they have.
Well, thank you.
Not just reading words. I
Well,
think
that's
a real big sell.
there are plenty of scientists and mental health professionals who write books. And there's always a debate. Is it easier to teach writing to a scientist, or is it easier to teach science to a writer? And there's no real answer to that.
Yeah.
What I do is I'm a writer first. I'm a journalist first. And my training is how to reach the broadest possible public with the most succinct information consistently. And if you can do that, then I feel like I've succeeded. Now, there are plenty of academic people who do sex research and write books, and I like those books, but they don't. Their sentences are too long. Is basically what it comes down to. Journalism, you have short sentences. People like their information in bite-sized little chunks. And so I don't use the words however or nevertheless very much. I just start a new sentence.
I tortured this guy as my editor, and James Wadley and I co-edited a text on sex therapy supervision, and I thought he was about to throttle me with my run-on sentences and verbosity.
Try introduce a comma once in a while.
Yeah, well, my book is quite long.
Period.
My book is sort of long for a book and for a trade book.
I was going to comment that's another. Folks shouldn't be daunted. It's one of those books that you can just leave someplace, a nightstand, and just pick up and open anywhere and read.
Yeah,
So
it's not the kind of
or.
Right. It's not the kind of book that it's not a novel that people are going to start on page 1 and wind up on page 400. Yeah. It's a book that people are going to dip into as needed. But in the first draft of that book, it was 25% longer. Mm-hmm. And I work with an editor who's very good. And he said, Mike, if someone drops this book on their foot, they're going to break a toe. So I wound up cutting it 25%. There's a rule, there's a saying in journalism that any piece can be cut 20% without losing anything.
Oof.
And if you just use the right word, if you've got 3 words and you can substitute 1 word, that's what you should do. And so I spent a whole lot of time trying to change 3 words into 1 word.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Now, I want to ask you about another in your library, because as also mentioned in our little banter earlier, another famous San Franciscan sexologist is the late Jack Annan, whose major contribution to sex therapy and the field in general was what all of us know as the PLICIT model, which it's an acronym for permission giving, limited information, specific suggestions, and intensive therapy, PLICIT. And generally, folks use that as kind of a way of delineating scope of practice. So sex therapists do the intensive therapy, and counselors and educators can do the specific suggestions, and certainly anybody can do the permission giving and provide information. Clearly, journalism is about providing information. So I noticed that amongst your many titles is a book on premature rapid ejaculation. And coming from a non-clinician, I'd love to hear how that book came to be and how what segment of the population is helped with just the information and the suggestions without needing to go into intensive therapy.
Well, on my site, greatsexguidance.com, I sell 135 articles, and more than 50% of my sales are the article, How to Last Longer, the guide to curing premature ejaculation. And the irony of this thing is not so ironic, but that's how I got into sex writing. I mean, in 1974, I was writing for a community newspaper in Michigan. And the editor said to me, Mike, we really have to have something for Valentine's Day that's going to bring in a lot of advertising. So it has to be really sexy. And you're the health writer. So I want you to write an article, How to Make Love. And I turned him down. I said, I'm 23 years old. You know, what do I know? And he said, but you live with your girlfriend, so you must know something about sex. I said, yeah, but to write about it? So he said, please, please, please. I said, no, forget it. I won't do it. And I walked home, and it was a 10-minute walk from the newspaper to my house. And when I got home, my girlfriend, who's now my wife and has been my lover for 50 years, said to me, what do you mean you won't write that article? You got to write that article. The editor knew Anne, had called her and said, listen, you've got to convince him to write this article. So I said, all right. I'll see what I can do. So this was 1974, and the Masters and Johnson books, the original books, had just come out in paperback. Human Sexual Response and Human Sexual Inadequacy had just come out in paperback in like 72. So I went to the library and I stumbled on this book, and I thought, I'll read this. Well, son of a gun, their original thing, as you know, was teaching women how to have orgasms and teaching men not to come so fast, right, which I was doing at the time. I was troubled by premature ejaculation as a 23-year-old. And I read their work on it, and I thought, oh my God, I can do something about this. So I went to Anne and I said, all right, listen, you were the one who got me to write this thing. They've got this program here. I want you to help me with that, and let's see if we can do it. And she said, oh, okay, sure. So just using their book as a guide, no therapist, no nothing, we worked our way through the program, and within 1 month, I had bomb-proof ejaculatory control. And I thought, oh my God, this is great. I can't be the only one. I mean, men should know about this. Yeah. And that was when I started writing about sex, and I've been writing about it ever since.
That's so awesome.
That's great. Now, over the years, since you started looking at that, and again, as you've been looking at it all these years, over the past nearly 50 years, have you seen any change in the way men approach their ejaculatory abilities, especially when we talk about rapid or premature ejaculation? I think you use the term involuntary ejaculation.
Yeah, voluntary. I was upset with the term premature when I was younger.
Oh, yeah.
Because it implied you're immature.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And so when I write about it, I always write about involuntary ejaculation, rapid involuntary, which some other sex people do. Mm-hmm. But the term premature ejaculation and PE is so rooted in the field, we can't like get rid of it. And so, so I do use that term too. And no, I don't think, every day another 100,000 guys turn 18 in America, and they don't know how to last at all. So premature ejaculation is like the big issue for men. Mm-hmm. And it's not the only issue. Certainly, I mean, you guys know that.
It's definitely the biggest for young men.
Yeah.
But it's one of the best ways to open the door to men to get past what their friends have told them in the locker room, to get past what they see in pornography, and say, listen, yeah, you want to last longer? Fine, I can help you last longer. And when you do, there's a few other things I want to mention too.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then they go, oh my God, I can last longer. What else do you want to tell me? I said, well, I want to tell you that it's not about your penis, really. It's about your whole body and her whole body, and you want to touch her all over for at least 20 minutes before you reach between her legs. And you know what? If you do that, she'll be happier and you're going to last longer too. Mm-hmm. So I used it as a kind of window into, a doorway into teaching men, young men in particular, about sexuality. And then I'm sure you're aware that in the middle age, when men turn about 50, there's a big upsurge in premature ejaculation again because they're losing their erections. Mm-hmm. They're having erection dissatisfaction, and that causes a lot of stress and tension,
Mhm.
and they feel like I better use it before I lose it.
Right.
And so in middle age, a lot of men revisit premature ejaculation and have to relearn, and they're very flummoxed. I get these, questions that come in. I'm 52. I've had great control, and now I don't. What the hell?
Mhm. Yeah, I see it
So,
clinically. I refer to it as lunging for the finish line.
yeah. And so again, it's a window into, it's a way to get in. And so, it's not like I'm thankful for premature ejaculation. I wish guys didn't have it. But it has its uses because it allows you to talk about a lot more than just lasting longer.
That's
We
so great.
in sex education, we talk a lot have been for years about these teachable moments, yet that, there seems to be a line where that doesn't seem to work in the clinical setting. And I think it's just as important in the clinical setting to look for those kinds of
Yeah.
teachable moments,
Mhm,
those entrees to go into
Absolutely.
something a little bit deeper.
I always
Right.
to all our therapists, I always tell them we're all obligate sexuality educators. We should always be vigilant for the teachable moments.
Mhm.
Right, right. Well, the thing about sex therapy is that it's often more about therapy than sex. And it's really relationship counseling with sexual problems presenting. And so I don't do that. I mean, while sex therapists are in their practices talking to individuals and couples, I'm reading the sex journals. And that's not that one is better than the other. It's just they're different focuses
Mhm.
and both equally valid.
Absolutely. So again, going back to how long you've been doing this, and I think after a certain amount of time in any field, I always find it interesting and helpful to kind of look at and say, this is where we were with this back then, and this is where we are with this right now. So focusing on questions that you get from younger guys, do you find there's a different focus in the questions that you're getting from younger guys today than when you first started taking questions? And one of the things that I'm really specifically interested in is, has there been maybe something of a shift where 20, 30 years ago, guys were interested more in what can I do to improve my sexual function? And today, maybe more of a tendency to what can I use to kind of better manage my sexual function? Is that something that you're seeing in the questions that you're getting?
Well, I think there've been two changes that come to mind right away. One is that although young men are as clueless today as I was when I was 18,
Mm-hmm.
the culture has shifted slightly toward more sensitivity to women's issues. And so there are plenty of young men who are sexual predators who just want to get laid.
Mm-hmm.
But what I find is that I get more questions now from young men saying, "I really want to please her. We're trying hard. But it's not quite right." And so that's one area where I think that men are a little more trying to be more sensitive. And the other is that I was surprised by this, but that 50 Shades of Grey is the BDSM romance novel trilogy.
Right.
Is the best-selling novel in the history of the printed word.
Oh, really?
And it became the best-selling novel in history after just 5 years. I mean, Uncle Tom's Cabin was the best-selling novel in the United States in the 19th century. It took 100 years.
Wow.
5 years, BDSM. And so I've gotten a lot more questions about BDSM since that came out. A lot of women women love that book.
Yeah.
And a lot of women have have submissive. There are plenty of women who are dominant, but most women in BDSM relationships tend to be submissive. And so I've actually gotten a lot of questions since that book came out of guys saying, hey, she wants me to top her, and I just don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to hit her. What is she talking about? And so so in Sizzling Sex, there's a whole big chapter about BDSM, which I think is really a fascinating wrinkle in sexuality. And the more I look into it, the more I am convinced that the BDSM people are correct when they say that it is the most intimate form of human contact possible. Because when you feel comfortable enough to declare your most secret hidden fantasies, and you say, I want that, and somebody else says, okay, I'll play that way,
Yeah.
the level of intimacy just explodes, and people are so close that they can't even believe it.
It's also the gold standard for sexual communication.
Right, and negotiation.
Right.
Being able to say, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're not, this is what I like, this is the line, and
Right.
safe words. I borrowed that concept with quote vanilla couples, even just to resolve conflict. There's
Yeah. I think everyone should use safe words. It shouldn't be just ghettoized in BDSM. Everybody should.
right.
So those are two things that I've noticed in the last decade or so.
Excellent.
In terms of people's and again, I know the questions and information, and people are always wanting, and I don't think we're ever going to see a lack of hunger for sexual information, but are people, I mean, again, other than looking at some of this stuff, are they kind of hungry in the same way?
Well, I see a non-representative sample. People who come to me asking questions, or people who read my blog and post comments, that's all pretty self-selected. And so you always have to be very careful overgeneralizing from one's own little slice of life.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's only one sexual generalization that is universally true, and that is that everyone is sexually unique. Our sexuality is unique as our fingerprints and DNA. And although there are trends, people generally have intercourse, but plenty of people don't. And so when I'm asked to generalize, I can to a certain extent, and I just have, but I also think it's very important to always keep in mind that everybody's unique and everyone's situation is different. And when you put two uniquely sexual people in a relationship, it's even more unique, trying to get them to meld and make it work. And that's what keeps sex therapists in business.
Sure.
It's hard, it's difficult, and people often need help.
Yep. And especially that it's often very inconsistent. I mean, desire and things that people are attracted to, kind of change, and there's ebb and flow, and
Right.
it's not a sort of straight, consistent or steady trajectory in, I think, anybody's life for the most part.
Correct. And that's why in Sizzling Sex, I consider all sexual issues throughout the entire lifespan, from the sexual implications of circumcision to the growing phenomenon of sex in nursing homes, because sex does change. And it's also very important to understand that what people learn about sex when they're young has huge implications for what happens in their teen years, in their young adult years, middle age, and late life. And so one of the problems with sex books in general, in my view, is that they tend to be rifle shot, sex and for your how to talk to your toddler, how to talk to your teenager, how to be a young adult and sexual, how to sex while pregnant, that kind of stuff. And they're all valid. I'm not criticizing people for writing those books. I just wanted to write a book that was more comprehensive and could talk about sex throughout the lifespan, all the issues that most people deal with. I mean, I can't cover everything. No, total comprehensiveness is impossible, but I tried to be as comprehensive as possible and write about all the issues that people have asked me about over 50 years.
I hope this would be complimentary. Could we call it a 21st century, everything you always wanted to know about sex?
Sure, why not? Yeah, I like that book. You know, that was in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
I read that book and I liked that book. But the best thing about that book, frankly, was its title.
Yeah.
That was like the brilliant title. And I was so jealous. I said, if I ever wrote about a book about sex, that's the title I want.
But wasn't the subtitle, but we're afraid to ask?
Yeah. Couldn't you?
About sex, but we're afraid to ask.
Or was that Woody Allen's movie?
Oh.
I like
They kind of came out at about the same time.
I like that movie too.
Yeah, it was a great movie.
Especially the guy rolling in the gutter drinking Woolite. I thought that was hilarious.
Well, it really
boy.
has been a treat getting a chance to talk to you and kind of meet you for the first time after having been a fan and an avid follower
admirer
of your blog for many years.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
We're going to encourage everybody to go to your favorite bookseller, brick and mortar or online, and get yourself a copy of Sizzling Sex for Life. Thank you.
We'll put up some information
Absolutely.
on
We'll
the
put
back
up the
end of this.
website for, once again, sexguidance.com.
Greatsexguidance.com is my Q&A site. And Sizzling Sex is available on Amazon and fine bookstores everywhere.
Dr. Michael Castleman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And again, I think, there's just so much great information that he has and he puts out there. Go to his website, get the book. It really is, and I think you can tell. One of the things I love talking about him, he's got just such a way of putting this out and giving this information that it's, and I hate to use a cliche word, but it's like so accessible. It's so easy to connect with.
He's got a great writing style.
Yeah.
For sure. It's
really
readable.
does. Yes.
A lot of, especially now, let's face it, people don't read a lot of books. I mean, readers read, but most people would rather be in front of a screen. So books like this have to be really engaging, readable. And like we said, this is a book you can just leave in the bathroom. Just grab it, open it up anywhere, and you'll have an interesting chapter to read.
Yeah, and the information is just good. It really is. We don't always get a chance to say that. There's a lot of good books that don't necessarily have great information, but this is a good book that has great information, and it is written in a way that you'll definitely benefit. And I think it's so comprehensive, and he writes in such a way that anybody, even people who are seasoned, who have been doing this for a while, on a professional level, we have still plenty of things to learn, and there's stuff in his book that we can all learn from.
Yeah, I love the question he asked, or the comparison about trying to make sexologists into writers or making writers into sexologists. And I think I come down on the side. It's tough. Even brilliant people, it's tough to get across in a way that's that accessible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So cheers to Mike Castleman.
Yes.
And good luck with the book. It's right on time.
And that will do it for another episode of Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. And I want to thank you again for joining us. As many of you have been each and every Friday night, we really, really appreciate it. And please continue to like us on Facebook, smash that YouTube subscribe button. And I think we
said
should also.
C-mash?
I did. That's a YouTube thing. I've been picking that up by watching YouTube, and also from watching YouTube to point out that little sort of bell icon in there. If you click that, you'll get notifications when our next shows are coming up. So, right? See, it's all about the buttons.
We're catching up to the 21st century.
Yes,
Thank you,
indeed.
folks. We'll see you next week for more Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
And continue to stay well.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.